The morning started quietly, the kind of quiet that almost felt too gentle for a house, usually filled with voices, footsteps, and the noise of daily life. Emily stood in the kitchen of her sister-in-law's home, holding a warm cup of coffee. Between her palms, she had arrived only 3 days earlier, needing time away from the place she used to share with her ex-husband. The separation had drained her emotionally, and she hoped this peaceful suburban home in Oregon would give her space to breathe again. The soft smell of cinnamon rolls came from the oven. The thin line of sunlight stretched across the counter. Outside the window, the trees wore their autumn colors: deep oranges, faded reds, soft browns. Everything looked calm, almost too calm for the storm of feelings inside her. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to slow her thoughts. But then she heard footsteps behind her, firm, slow, and getting closer. She turned, expecting maybe her sister-in-law, but the sight standing in the doorway made her straighten. It was Nathan, her sister-in-law's 22-year-old son, back from college for a short break. Emily hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. The last time she saw him, he was still a teenager who laughed too loud and ate cereal at midnight. But now, the person in front of her looked older, more grounded. His shoulders were broader, his expression calmer, and there was a seriousness in his eyes she didn't recognize. "Morning," he said in a soft, steady voice. "Morning," Emily replied, surprised at how different he looked and sounded. He had grown into himself in ways she hadn't expected. He stepped into the kitchen, keeping his hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, as if trying to hide the nervous energy she sensed around him. There was something about the way he looked at her, focused, thoughtful, almost protective, that made her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. "I didn't know you'd be up this early," he said, taking a seat at the small breakfast table. "I couldn't sleep much," she admitted. "New place, new thoughts." Nathan nodded, as if he understood more than she said out loud. "It's good you're here," he told her, his tone sincere but gentle enough not to cross any lines. "You should get some rest while you can." His kindness surprised her. She had spent months hearing sharp comments, cold tones, and unfinished sentences. Simple kindness felt like warm air on frozen hands. Emily reached into the oven and took out the tray of cinnamon rolls. Nathan watched her for a moment, something like a thought forming in his mind. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. She placed a plate in front of him. "Want one?" He nodded but didn't touch it. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "Emily, can I say something?" Her heart skipped a beat, though she didn't know why. Maybe it was the seriousness in his voice, or the way his eyes held hers with steady determination. "Of course," she said. He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Since you got here, you seem different, quieter. I know things have been hard for you, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but..." He stopped, his breath catching for a second, as if the words suddenly weighed more than he expected. Emily's pulse quickened. She wasn't used to people noticing her feelings anymore. She wasn't used to anyone speaking about her pain with care. Nathan tried again, voice lower this time. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been thinking about since yesterday." Emily felt a small tug of nervous curiosity. "What is it?" He looked straight at her, without rushing or pretending he didn't mean what he was about to say. His seriousness told her this wasn't small talk, wasn't anything casual. He had something real to say, but before he could speak, the front door swung open, and the sound of his mother's upbeat voice filled the house. "Nathan, are you awake? I need you for a second." Nathan shot a frustrated glance toward the hallway, the moment broken instantly. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head slightly. "Great timing," he muttered under his breath. Emily almost smiled at his reaction. It felt strangely familiar, like something two people would share when an important moment was interrupted. "It's okay," she said softly. "No," he replied with a seriousness that surprised her. "It's not. I really wanted to say this." He pushed back his chair but didn't stand up just yet. He looked at her one more time, and in that look, she sensed something warm, something honest. Something she didn't expect to see in his eyes. Something she hadn't felt directed at her in a long time. "I'll come back," he said, his tone steady and certain. "I don't want to leave this unsaid." Then he stood and walked toward the hallway. His mother called him again, and he disappeared around the corner. Emily stayed still for a moment, cup of coffee warming her hands, her thoughts suddenly spinning faster than before. She didn't know what he wanted to say. Didn't even know why her heart reacted the way it did when he spoke to her. But the way he looked at her, the quiet intensity in his eyes lingered in her mind long after he left the kitchen. For the first time in months, she felt something shift inside her. Not fully hope, not yet. But something close to it. Something like the beginning of feeling seen again. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself, unaware that this small, almost interrupted moment would become the start of something she never expected. Something emotional, gentle, and life-changing. And somewhere in the hallway, Nathan paused, leaning against the wall for a moment, wondering how to say what he had carried inside him for years, and whether Emily was ready to hear it. The afternoon arrived quietly, with a soft gray sky pressing low over the neighborhood, and Emily found herself wrapped in a blanket on the porch, trying to steady the thoughts that kept running through her mind. She kept replaying Nathan's expression from the morning, the way he looked at her like he carried something heavy on his heart, the way he almost said it before the moment was stolen by his mother's voice. She told herself not to read into anything, not after the emotional mess she had been through during the last year of her marriage, but the truth was clear. Something inside her had shifted. She had spent months feeling invisible, almost fading into the background of her own life. But the way Nathan spoke to her earlier made her feel noticed in a way she hadn't expected. She tightened the blanket around her shoulders and stared at the quiet street, trying to convince herself she was imagining the warmth she had seen in his eyes. Just as her thoughts grew too loud, the porch creaked behind her. Nathan stepped outside and sat beside her, leaving a respectful gap but still close enough that she felt the comfort of his presence in the cool air. He didn't speak at first. He just sat there, elbows resting loosely on his knees, letting the silence settle in a way that felt strangely peaceful. Finally, he said, "You look worried," his voice calm but full of concern. Emily didn't answer right away. It felt strange to admit her worries to someone so much younger, someone she remembered as a teenager running around the backyard with muddy shoes. But he wasn't that boy anymore, and the quiet maturity in his tone broke through her hesitation. "Just thinking," she said softly, "about this morning." He asked, turning slightly toward her. She looked at him, surprised he noticed so quickly. "You never finished telling me what you wanted to say," she answered. Nathan sighed and leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting toward the edge of the porch. "I know. I wanted to say it then, but everything got interrupted." He paused, rubbing his palms together as if trying to warm them, though the air wasn't that cold. "I didn't expect you to show up yesterday," he admitted. "When Mom said you were coming, I thought, I don't know. I just didn't expect it to hit me the way it did." Emily's heart tightened. "It's hit you? How?" He shook his head. "I'll tell you. I just want to say it right." She nodded, unsure if she was ready, but knowing she wanted to hear it anyway. For a moment, a quiet understanding settled between the men, unspoken acknowledgement that something emotional was building. Something neither of them fully understood yet. The wind brushed softly across the porch, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. Emily looked at Nathan out of the corner of her eye and noticed the tiredness in his expression, as if he had been thinking too hard about something for too long. Before she could ask him what he meant, his phone buzzed in his pocket, loud enough to break this soft moment. He checked it, and his face shifted just slightly, but enough for her to notice. "I need to handle something," he said, pushing himself to his feet, though he didn't seem eager to leave. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He nodded, but the hesitation in his eyes told her the truth was more complicated. Emily. Later tonight, can we talk? His voice carried that same seriousness from the morning, the same weight that made her heart tremble with a mix of curiosity and worry. I don't want to leave things unclear, he added. She nodded, giving him a small, steady smile. Of course we can talk later. Nathan exhaled, almost in relief, as if afraid she might have said no. He gave her one more look, one that felt like he was memorizing her expression, then walked down the porch steps, heading toward the driveway. Emily watched him leave, trying to guess what he was hiding behind that look. She stayed outside until the sky turned darker, hoping the quiet would calm her thoughts, but it only made her more aware of every little feeling she had been ignoring. When she finally went inside, the house was warm and bright. Her sister-in-law chatted happily about plans for the week. But Emily answered only with small smiles and soft nods, her mind too busy with the unanswered question hanging between her and Nathan. As the night settled in, she waited without wanting to admit she was waiting. She sat in the living room for a while, then in the kitchen, then finally in the guest room, telling herself she wasn't expecting anything. But each passing minute made the silence feel heavier. By the time the house grew completely still, one thing was clear. Nathan wasn't coming back that night. Emily lay down, staring at the faint glow of streetlights through the window, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. Part of her felt silly for caring so much. Another part wondered what he wanted to say that made him look so restless. And a small, quiet part of her, a part she thought had disappeared long ago, felt something like anticipation. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and tried to breathe slowly. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring or what Nathan needed to tell her. But she felt it deep in her chest. Whatever he was holding inside wasn't small, wasn't casual, wasn't something he could easily brush aside. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt a soft, trembling spark inside her, like her heart was waking up again after a long winter. Unsure but hopeful, fragile but real. Something was coming, and she could feel it. Even in the quiet darkness, she felt it. Morning sunlight slipped through the kitchen window, bright enough to make Emily wince as she entered with sleepy steps, still thinking about how Nathan never returned last night. She told herself not to read too much into it, not to expect anything, not to let her imagination run ahead of reality. The last thing she needed was another disappointment, another situation where she misunderstood someone's intentions. But as she reached for a glass of water, the sound of footsteps made her freeze. Nathan walked in, his hair messy, eyes tired, like he hadn't slept at all. There was something heavy in his face, something that made Emily's stomach twist. With worry, "Can we talk now?" he asked quietly, standing a few feet away, but feeling much closer because of the seriousness in his voice. Emily nodded, even though her heart thudded nervously. She sat down at the table, and Nathan slid into the chair opposite her, running a hand through his hair as if trying to gather courage. The silence stretched for a moment before he finally spoke. "I left last night because I needed time to think," he said, voice low but steady. "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." Emily felt a sharp ache of confusion. "About what?" she asked. Nathan looked down at his hands, then lifted his eyes to meet hers, directly open, honest, raw. "About telling you the truth," he said. "About how I feel." Emily's chest tightened, and she sat very still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly in case she interrupted the moment. He continued, "When you went through everything with your marriage, when you stayed with us for that short time, I saw how strong you were, even when you were hurting. You tried so hard to pretend everything was fine, but I could tell it wasn't, and I saw how lonely you were, even in a house full of people." His words were gentle, respectful, but also painfully accurate. Emily's throat tightened. She had worked so hard to hide her sadness, but somehow Nathan had noticed it anyway. "I didn't mean to notice so much," he went on softly. "You were going through something personal. I cared more than I expected to." Emily blinked, confused. "Nathan," she whispered, unsure what he was trying to say, unsure if she was misunderstanding everything. But he leaned forward slightly, not invading her space, just trying to make sure she heard him clearly. "When you left, I thought the feeling would pass," he said. "But it didn't. And when you walked into the kitchen yesterday, it all came back even stronger. I didn't expect it. I wasn't prepared for it. But I can't ignore it anymore." He paused, letting the words settle between them. "Emily," he said gently, "you matter to me. More than you think." Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, unsure what to do with the sudden wave of emotions. She had come here to recover, to find peace, not to hear something that made her heart wake up in ways she wasn't prepared for. "Nathan," she began slowly, "I've been through a lot. I don't know how to handle anything new. And you're—" She stopped, realizing she didn't even know how to finish the sentence. "Younger. Yes, but that wasn't the point." What she felt wasn't judgment or fear, it was surprise. Deep, overwhelming surprise. Nathan didn't interrupt her. If anything, he softened, sensing her confusion. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said. "I'm not trying to make things complicated. I just needed you to know the truth. You're not alone. You're not invisible. And you're not broken the way you think you are." Something warm spread through her chest, something she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Being seen, being understood, being spoken to with sincerity instead of blame or frustration, it felt like a small miracle. Before she could gather her thoughts, before she could even decide how to respond, they heard a voice from the living room. "Nathan, could you help me with this?" His mother called out, cheerful and unaware of the fragile moment she was interrupting. Nathan closed his eyes for a second, clearly frustrated but trying to hide it. He stood up slowly, not breaking eye contact with Emily. "I'm not running away this time," he said quietly. "We'll finish this, I promise." He gave her one more look, steady, almost protective, then walked toward the hallway. Emily watched him disappear into the living room, her thoughts rushing faster than her heartbeat. She wasn't sure how to make sense of the last 5 minutes. She wasn't sure she was ready for the kind of honesty he had just offered her. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. His words had reached a part of her heart she thought was long gone. The kitchen felt warmer somehow, softer. The morning light didn't hurt her eyes anymore. She took a deep breath, fragile but hopeful. For the first time since her marriage ended, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like someone picking up the broken pieces alone. She felt genuinely seen. And that feeling stayed with her long after Nathan walked away, settling deep inside her chest like a quiet, glowing truth she didn't know what to do with yet. But one thing was clear. Nothing about her life felt the same anymore. Something had shifted. Something had begun. Something she never expected. Evening settled over the house like a soft blanket. The golden light fading into the quiet glow of the garden lamps. And Emily found herself drawn outside. Unable to sit still after the tension of the morning and the unanswered questions from Nathan, she walked slowly toward the small garden, feeling the cool breeze on her skin and the faint scent of autumn leaves, mixed with the sweet aroma of the flowers planted near the fence. There, standing by the path, was Nathan, hands casually tucked into his pockets. But his posture held a subtle tension that made her heart skip. He didn't rush to speak, simply waited, giving her the space to approach on her own, and the quiet between them was filled with a strange, gentle anticipation that neither wanted to break too soon. She stopped a few feet away and said softly, almost a whisper, "You said I matter. But why tell me now?" Nathan looked at her directly, his brown eyes steady, full of sincerity and warmth. "Because you deserve to hear it," he replied. "Simply because I didn't want you to think you're alone, even for a moment. And because I had to be honest." Emily felt her chest tighten, a mixture of relief, curiosity, and nerves stirring together. She took a small step closer, unsure but wanting to hear more, wanting to understand the depth of what he was saying. Felt broken for a long time, she admitted, her voice trembling just slightly, not with fear but with the weight of honesty that had been building inside her for years. Nathan's expression softened, and he moved just a little closer, careful to respect her space while offering reassurance. "You're not broken," he said gently, his tone deliberate and patient. "You've been through pain, yes, but you've also been brave. And sometimes the hardest part is letting someone see that bravery, letting someone see you at your most vulnerable." Emily swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. She hadn't realized how much she had wanted someone to notice her, to understand her struggles without judgment until she heard those words from him. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly, almost afraid to let the words out into the open. Nathan gave a small, understanding smile, the kind that made her feel both seen and safe. "You don't have to know," he said softly. "You just don't have to close the door on something that feels real. We can take it slow. We can let it grow naturally, one step at a time. It's no rush." The air between them seemed to hum with unspoken emotion, tender but grounded, emotional but calm. And Emily realized with a quiet shock that she hadn't felt this kind of connection in a long time, not the rush of infatuation, but the steady pull of something deeper, more meaningful. She looked at Nathan, noticing the faint curve of his lips and a half smile, the subtle nervousness in his eyes, and something in her heart shifted. It was hope, yes, but it was more than hope. It was a gentle excitement that made her chest ache, in a way that felt alive, not painful. "Maybe we can talk more tomorrow," she said finally, finding courage in her own voice. "Take things slow." Nathan nodded, relief and warmth crossing his face in equal measure. "Slow is perfect," he said, his voice soft but full of assurance. For a moment neither of them spoke, simply letting the quiet night wrap around them. The garden lights casting soft shadows, the air filled with the faint sounds of evening birds, settling, leaves rustling, distant traffic humming gently. Emily felt a trembling calm, as though the weight she had carried for months was lifting, replaced by a new sense of possibility. Nathan didn't move. He simply stood there, patient and steady, letting her process everything without pressure. She realized how rare that was, to have someone offer honesty, care, and understanding without rushing, without expecting anything in return. It was refreshing, grounding, and emotional all at once. She took a slow breath, feeling the warmth of the night and the gentle glow of connection. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by loneliness or past heartbreak. Nathan's presence beside her wasn't overwhelming. It was steady, kind, and patient, giving her space to feel, space to heal, and space to grow. "I never thought I'd feel this again," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Feel, understood. Nathan's eyes softened further, and he stepped just a fraction closer. Still careful, still respectful. "You deserve it," he said simply, "and you'll get it. One day at a time." The night air seemed to carry the weight of those words, settling them deep in her chest. Emily realized that what she felt wasn't fleeting attraction, it was a gentle connection. Emotional and sincere, the kind that came from shared understanding, mutual respect, and a recognition of one another's struggles. She smiled, a small but genuine expression, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not the naive kind, but the kind that grows slowly, quietly, but firmly at the center of the heart. Nathan mirrored her smile, his relief and quiet happiness evident, and for a moment the world around them faded into the background. It was just the two of them, under the soft glow of the garden lights, sharing a silence that wasn't empty but full of meaning. Emily stepped back toward the house, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced for months. She glanced over her shoulder at Nathan, who stood watching her, patient and calm. And a small thrill ran through her chest. Her heart wasn't broken anymore. It was waking up again. It was learning to trust, to hope, to feel deeply without fear, and Nathan's quiet honesty, his gentle patience, and his heartfelt words had been the first light piercing through the darkness. That night, as she settled into her room, Emily felt the warmth linger inside her chest, slow, steady glow that whispered of new beginnings. She knew nothing about the future was certain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace it. Nathan's presence, his honesty, and his respect had reminded her that love and connection weren't always loud or dramatic. They could be quiet, patient, and gentle, growing in moments like this, in small confessions and shared silences. As she drifted to sleep, she realized that the story between them was just beginning. And that beginning was fragile, emotional, and beautiful in its simplicity. And for the first time, Emily wasn't afraid of what the heart could feel.